Cool. Thank you, Irina. So this time we're going to be talking about relational mode. And this is something that we have started developing like 4 years ago at least, when some of the, like when I joined Sociocracia Brasil. I don't know if Tanya can tell us a little bit about how it was before. But this is all about people, how we create the space for people within a sociocracy. And then, Tanya, would you like to guide us through a check-in that is in relation?
Sure. Relational mode is really about relationships and emotions and conflicts and those things in this personal space that happen. And so just as a quick check-in and something that may be a useful tool for you, Nara's going to put maybe we can show it to them, Nara. I don't know how many people actually can access it, but if they can't access, if whoever can access it, fine. Whoever can't, then we can show them on the screen. But there's an atlas of emotions, and so it's a realm where we're discovering what are the emotions that we feel while we're in a workplace, when we have something that happens between our peers. And one type of check-in that we do sometimes is that we ask people to open up this link and just write down two of the emotions that they're feeling. And so when you look at sadness, for example, there's a range of feelings of sadness. When you look at disgust, there's a range of feelings. And so this helps people start to think about this range of emotions and helps people to have an easier time talking about emotions. So I don't know how easy it is for people to access, but maybe if a couple of you would like to put into the chat, what are the emotions that you're feeling right now? Two of them, maybe. This helps people to explore. But yeah, so how are you arriving? How are you right now with COVID and with all these online presentations and with the conference today? What are the feelings that are going on with you? How are you with homeschooling at home now and also being with your partner 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? How is that? So this is one way that people can arrive at a meeting, putting forth their emotions and maybe being able to move forward onto other things. So Nara, I think maybe it might be too difficult. Good. Think it, put happy. Okay, curious. Okay, Pascal. Feeling good, but overwhelmed with?
The world outside.
Yeah.
Luciana there. Hello, Lucia.
Joy and love, feeling a little anxious. Yeah, okay, good. So there we go. Excellent. Overwhelmed, yeah. So let's move on, Nara. Calm and happy, that's easy. Exactly.
We could be doing this presentation in Portuguese.
Okay. So it's a nice way for us to connect with our emotions and help people arrive at a meeting.
Great.
So
now we're gonna introduce ourselves.
Yeah. So we've already done this for other people, but I'm Tanya. I'm one of the founders of Sociocracy Brazil. I'm one of the trainers in SALT Brazil here in Brazil, and I'm also a trainer and consultant for Bioinspiral and Nara.
I'm Nara. I'm also part of these 3 organizations, and we have been doing some consulting jobs and training courses. One of them is SALT, which has been created by SOFA, and we have done that with Ted and Jerry, and afterwards we decided we are in our 5th edition now, and we have been developing all these patterns and these ways of practicing sociocracy in Brazil. Cool. And now I'm going to go through the agenda real quick because it's a lot, and I just want to let you know what is this lot, what is the whole that we're going through, right? So we did our check-in, we talked a little bit about us, and then we're going to tell you the story of how it all started, the relational mode, and then we're going to go through organizational spaces, why relational mode, and then we're going to start going to the relational mode itself. and then we're going to go through a few examples, and then we can share this presentation with you. If you don't catch all of them, it doesn't matter, but we're going to share afterwards so you can look at it. And I'm going to talk about like 2 minutes about culture change, and then open for questions and checkout. Right? So,
Okay.
Tanya.
Okay. So how did it all start? Well, I'm from Canada, super objective. You know, I can deal with criticism sometimes not. But when I came to Brazil, I started working with another person who's Brazilian, but lived outside of Brazil for a long time and had kind of like this same pragmatic and objective way. And we realized that sociocracy would be great because it was also very objective and pragmatic. But then when we brought it to Brazil, we realized, it doesn't necessarily take care of the emotional side that the Brazilians need. So what we felt was that we needed to start implementing and adapting the methodology so that there was a space that took care of people making the transition into sociocracy. Okay, and so bit by bit, we started, you know, trying to figure out what that was until one day when we brought James Priest to Brazil in 2017. He was talking about backlogs, and we thought, oh my gosh, yeah, what about an emotional backlog? That's what we need, emotional backlog. So we started creating an emotional backlog where we could put our emotional tensions on there due to conflicts or whatever else was going on. And we created a space that was separate from governance and operations where we just took care of relationships. And that has become part of our methodology here in Brazil called Relational Mode.
Yes, and just to point out that, you know, this is when I arrived at Sociocracia Brasil. I was living in Europe, and then I came back, and then it was James Priest was in Brazil, and I was part of that workshop when we created this mode, you know, and just to point out that the intention here is to have the same relevance as governance or operations, because I know that in sociocracy we use nonviolent communication and other tools that are already taking care of that part. But what I have always heard from the trainers is like, okay, you need to take care of that as well, you know, but like it's a separate tool that will do that. And what we really want here is to bring that within sociocracy, right? So I think that cool. Tanya.
Okay, so organizational spaces. So just to understand what Nara was talking about, like where do we create this space? One thing we realize is that, you know, in organizations, there's a personal space where we take care more of where we look at the person itself, what the person's values are, their talents are, what type of relationships they have outside of the organization and sometimes inside of the organization. And that's a personal space. And so the organization can't really interfere so much in that space. But when there is some sort of conflict, we are entering into the personal space. And if we don't have something that takes care of that, then sociocracy might not be looking at that personal space as much as it could be. Then there's the tribe, which is where we develop our community, we develop our connections with people. That's when we go to the bar on a Friday, where we have fun, when we just, you know, get to know each other better. And that's the place where we shouldn't make decisions and we shouldn't do work. And then there's the role space where the work happens. You know, that's when things really start to get movement and going, and that's where the day-to-day work happens. And then there's the organizational space, which is the circle space, where we look at structure and where we ritualize our meetings and where we make decisions that affect the structure of the organization. So all these spaces exist within an organization. And in sociocracy, there are clear definitions for how to take care of the organizational space, the role space. Tribal is something that we decide to do. Not necessarily we have a mode for that, but that's something that happens quite a bit. And the relational space is really made to take care of this personal space that can interfere or come into the role space and the organizational space. Okay. And so this is just a little bit of information, a little bit more information about each space, which I talked a little bit more. I talked about that, so I don't think we need to go over it again. But if you have the presentation, then you'll have those points. So why relational mode? We're dealing with people, and people have emotions, people have feelings, people have relationships, and that is room for conflict. But what else happens when we're looking at whatever project that we work on, or whatever organization we work on? There's a curve called the motivational curve, which explains our process throughout a project or life in an organization. And this can happen. It's something that happens many times. So if I'm in an organization, it's not like the entire life of my organization, I'm going to go through this curve. It's happening all the time, depending on what project I'm working on, or what team I'm working on, or what time of the year it is, right? So usually when we're starting something new, we have this feeling like, oh, okay, that's seductive. I like that. That looks interesting. But I don't know if I want to get involved. And bit by bit, I start realizing, yeah, maybe I do. So I engage in that process. And I think, oh my God, this is really, really great. And I start to get to know my team members better. And I get involved in the work. And I'm willing to put in a lot of time and energy. And then I'm thinking, oh, this is the best team I've ever worked on. And we don't have any conflicts at all. Everyone's great. So we call this the honeymoon phase. And then things start to happen. And I realize, Nara's not as cool as I thought she was. And I enter into like kind of this phase of denial, because I think, no, but maybe she just had a bad day or something, she's probably not that bad, whatever. And then I start thinking, okay, that's it. I don't want to really work with Nara anymore. So Nara can come to work Mondays and Wednesdays, and I'll come Tuesdays and Thursdays, so that we don't have to work together. That's fine. Let's negotiate here so we don't have to really look at each other. And then that doesn't work. So I enter into a phase of anger, and she does as well. And I get to a point where I'm just so tired of things, and I enter into depression. And then I want to either fight with Nara, or I get scared and paralyzed, and I don't do anything, or I just leave the organization. And what happens is that this curve is very common, like I said, in organizations and the projects that we work on. And if we're not careful, we can enter into this depression phase where we have, where it's really difficult to get out of. And so if we're aware of this curve, when we're on this downturn, when we realize that we're in the honeymoon, but we're entering into denial, we can take time to open up a relational mode and deal with it then, so that we don't go down this path where we have really a lot of difficulties getting back from it and moving towards acceptance and realistic hope, and maybe even saving the project or the team or the relationship between people. Okay.
Can I just say something? Just to say that, of course, Tanya was kidding when she was giving this example between the two of us, but we have really at BioInspiro had a relational moments, issues, amongst us, and we've had, we have done sessions to take care of that, and it has been really beautiful, and I felt that after that it has only deepened our connection and the way we work together. Do you want to talk about that? No, right?
No, that's okay. Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to go right now into relational mode, what we call relational mode. So as I said before, we have, like, you're all familiar with, I think most of you will be familiar with Sociocracy and with the governance mode, or governance meetings and operational meetings. And governance is really to give clarity to the structure, right? We make decisions about roles and circles and policies. And in the operational mode, we give clarity to the work, and we synchronize, we remove blockages. But in relational mode, we are cleansing the field, all those underlying tensions that are coming from the relations are sometimes, pushed under the carpet. And then we want to really look at that and give space for that. And then we feel that these three different modes are super important to be part of the circles and throughout the organization in the collaboration of the work, so that the organization can really thrive and be healthy. So in governance, we have patterns, like proposal forming, consent decision making, selection, evaluation, etc. Operational mode, we have the project updates, we have feedback, synchronizing and removing blockages. I'm assuming that you are familiar with that. And then in relational mode, what we could have as patterns, some of the patterns that we have found and we have been using are there's artful participation, in Sociocracy 3.0, they're already talking about that. A check-in, but like a deeper check-in, like we did in the beginning, really focusing on the emotions or the relations, and a deeper checkout, also a relational checkout. A sharing space, creating a space just for sharing, for people to listening how each person is at the moment, regardless of work. Empathic listening, so to listening to each other in its deeper mode as well. And then what I'm going to talk about now is about these phases of prevention, management, and transformation of conflict. So if we think about conflict within an organization, there are something that are necessary. They're not. It's not possible to avoid all of them. And if I feel like I said, I feel like once you work through a conflict, it really builds, this bond, this confidence between people. So in the prevention mode, what we're looking at is really building trust. And then in managing mode is when the conflict happens, what to do. How can we improve our listening and co-responsibility, coming out of judgment and going to curiosity. And then into transforming mode or aspect of it, a phase of it, we're looking at the long term, the culture, how do we change the culture so that it is more conducive to this health in the relational area, right? And if we need patterns in all three of these areas. In terms of the preventing area or moment, we're talking about using the elements of sociocracy that already build that kind of trust. So for instance, the circle aim being clear, or the members, being clear, not people coming in and out, doing check-in and check-out, using all the processes in place, and by doing that, this can already create a space for people to talk and then avoid conflicts or minimize them. But also implementing new patterns that will take care of people. For instance, using sociocracy, creating a role to mediate whenever needed, or creating a circle that will take care of people and will create these spaces for people to be vulnerable. And also, super important, we have found that people need to be trained in these areas. So for instance, a nonviolent communication, constellation, whatever, in terms to help them build this capacity, or help the organization as a whole to build capacity in this area. Right. Okay, but then conflict happens, right? So what we do when this happens? So if there is something during a meeting, so the role of the facilitator is to know what to do about that, right? But the facilitator doesn't need to do that on his or her own. It's the entire circle's responsibility to care for that. So the facilitator has a few options. He or she can do a round, or suggest that if this could be taken outside by the role of the mediator, or if this is really crucial, it can't go on with the meeting, open the relational mode right there and then. And anybody can ask for that, we need relational mode for that. And the facilitator is going to support deciding whether it's going to be there, right there and then, or afterwards, creating a moment for that. And if it is outside of the meeting, then there is a need to see who's going to facilitate that part, right? So a mediator or a facilitator to support that conflict to be dealt with or to be taken care of. And in the long run, to see that there is a need for cultural change. And we see that a lot when we're doing consulting jobs, that we're implementing something that is talking about structure, but is, bringing up all those, feelings that have not been spoken, or are somehow disguised. So this need to take care of this cultural aspect at the same time as implementing sociocracy is being super important for us. And so how to do that is to create the conditions for individuals to thrive by creating the spaces where people can be vulnerable, right? And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this cultural aspect right at the end. But right now, I would like to hand it over to Tanya to show a few of the examples of, concretely how to implement that.
So what do we do when we need to enter into relational mode? You can go to the next one. So we did something a little bit like that relational check-in, but we can have a relational check-in that lasts the whole meeting. Okay, so where we look at what the emotional state that people are in at that moment, where needs are, what their expectations are, what their dreams are. And sometimes just having the space to talk about that and hear everyone, that really helps to create connection between people and go into work after. So it's this sort of prevention. Where are we as a team? How are we emotionally? Okay, next. So there's one emotional check-in that we do that's really, really good. We take all the emotions and fear, anger, joy, disgust, and sadness, and we put them on a scale of 100%. And then each person has to decide what percentage of fear they're feeling, of anger, joy, disgust, sadness. And they tell everyone why. I'm feeling 15% of fear because I don't know what's going to happen. I might be out of work next week. Just bringing that all out. And this is a really, really long check-in, and it's very, very powerful because people have this chance to just be vulnerable, put it all out there, and it really helps. It's a great preventional tool.
And I don't know if you know this movie, these are characters from a movie called Inside Out. And if you haven't watched that, do that because it's great. It's a cartoon, but it's really, really good.
Okay. And also, like when we're doing a checkout, so we always do a checkout in our meetings, right? But there can be, we always want to evaluate how the facilitation is, maybe connection, the balance between effectiveness and equivalence. But how's the vibe? How am I leaving this meeting? How do I feel this connection between myself and people in the circle? And we like this a lot. What is your minimal elegant step this week to improve your relations? So if everyone can say that, this week I'm going to do this, and it's just a little step, it's much easier to do a lot of little steps than to do something that's really, really big. And having people name what they're going to do in front of everyone brings responsibility to the person. And also people in the circle heard it, so they're going to be waiting for it as well. Okay, so empathic listening. So sometimes we find that there's a conflict and we need to stop. And this is something that Nara and I actually did. There was a conflict and we had two different views on the conflict. And so what happened, one person is talking and says how they understand that, and the other person is just listening. And that's it. Not giving advice and not trying necessarily to understand more, just listening, holding space for that person. And I'm not sure if the next one is about mirroring, but you could, and often what we do is in this empathetic listening, I say what's going on with me, and Nara just repeats what she heard. And I can say, oh yeah, okay, yeah, that, no, that part, no. And the same thing, then she speaks, she says what's going on with her, and I repeat what she said. And often we don't need to get anywhere to any sort of conclusion or resolution. It's just understanding what's going on with the other person. And after that, maybe if there needs to be more work done, do it. But at that moment, just let's listen. And often that's enough.
And this can be also done in preventing mode, even if there is no conflict in place, right? So you can have a person that is your pair, an empathic pair, that periodically, like weekly or bi-weekly, you talk to that person and you're heard, and you can talk about other things, and then the person can also do that. I have that with another person, and it is really beautiful. I super recommend.
So in a meeting, Nara, maybe you can present this one?
Sure. So I have already said a few things about this, but this is like the pattern, right? So understand, explore, decide. This is something that SOFA uses or introduced. So we use this meta pattern to see, okay, what would be done within understanding in this mode of managing the conflict within a meeting, right? So the facilitator can try to reflect back, mirror what the person is saying, and can ask for the people to give other mirrors as well, to make sure we are understanding what the concern, what the tension is, right? And then the exploration can be, what do we do with this? And then the decision is that, well, we stop this meeting right now and we enter in relational mode, or we find some time afterwards to go into relational mode. So this is, and it can also be like a new policy, right? If this is something, this tension is being created because of something within the structure, this can also become a proposal in governance mode that changes something that can support people in general to be more comfortable within the organization and not have this emotional tensions, right? Do you want me to say this one as well?
Sure.
So this is also a pattern. Of course, this doesn't replace a full mediation training. So of course, we need to develop mediation abilities, right? So something that you could do, like in the understanding phase, is just a simple question. What do you hear him? What did you hear him or her say? And you just ask, so that the dialogue is happening. So you're there to support these two people to hear each other out, right? So this single question can be really, really helpful. To a person says something and then the other needs to mirror whatever the first person is saying. And then in the exploration phase, who else needs to be present? Maybe, there are other people that are involved in the conflict. And how can we take care of this? And then, if enough was done in terms of eliciting feelings and needs, what are the requests, right? And then in the design phase, then it's coming to a plan, how we can work in this in the relationship together, finding win-win strategies. And then, of course, always see how and when to evaluate. Okay, so we're doing this for 3 months, and then afterwards, let's check in again to see how it went, how it's going on. That's it. Back to you, Tanya.
Okay, so this is a really nice question. What is between us? So this is like the transforming stage. So in a round, each person replies to the question. And so it might be between 2 or 3 people, what is between us? And it's a moment to dig down deep and put it out there on the table, and the other people just listen. No need for justifications or clarifications. And if necessary, once we put that out on the table, and after that, we can do a round of requests. What do I request? And it doesn't mean that the person is going to receive those requests necessarily, but they can put those requests out there, and some people can say, I can do that, or I can't do that. We just need people to be honest about what they can and can't do. And if it's enough, the group can go back after and check if it's okay. But this is one question. It's so simple, but it's very, very deep and moving and transforming. Yeah. And so going back to understand, explore, and decide. So when we're in the transformational stage, we're really looking at the relations between people, and also we can look at relationships between people, as well as the relationship between the circle And we can also use that to evaluate how we are as a circle. And we want to look at, what types of behaviors do we want within our circle, within our relationship, and which ones are unfavorable for our organizational culture. Because when we're implementing sociocracy, we're actually making a cultural change. We're trying to go from one type of culture to one where it is more, people have more responsibility, people can make errors, people can be more transparent. And for that to happen, we need to create a space, a safe space for people to be able to show themselves, right? When we go into the exploration stage, we look at what are the acupuncture points that we could look at, that we need to focus on, that could heal the whole. So sometimes there are these little points that if we hone in on them, we can look together collectively as a group of how we can heal those points, and we can create this healthy culture that we want within our organization, so that we're creating a culture where we're regenerating ourselves as individuals as well as the organization as a whole. And if we're doing that, we're doing work outside as well that's being regenerative into the world. So what types of agreements do we need to make so that we can support this change? And how are the ways that we can remember that we're doing that? Maybe we need some indicators. Maybe we need to do some project updates. But what is the structure that we need to put in place, that we're looking at our culture and we're monitoring our cultural change and transformation? And then when we move into decide, yes, what are the cultural artifacts that we want to develop? Let's focus on, this is what we're going to do. What are the policies that we're going to put into place, and how and when are we going to evaluate them?
And this is also the place when you define, what the rituals that are going to be implemented in the long run, right? So what are the regular meetings just for relational mode? So it's different to doing this, just when the conflict happens, and really having that space, like monthly, there is a meeting for the tribe to get together and to talk about, that impersonal aspect. So this is how or when you can create them.
And just like a quick point, when we're doing consulting, we usually try and implement this right from the beginning, so that it's part of the process, helps people make the transition from one sort of cultural organizational mode to another one, and so that it becomes part of the practice.
Cool. And just to talk a little bit, really briefly, about culture changes. This is a long subject, so I'm not going to cover, 1 inch of that. But this diagram comes from the Design of Regenerative Cultures book of Daniel Val, and I really love it, because I feel like there is everything in there that we're trying to build when we're talking about culture, right? So what we find usually within organizations is that culture of fear, or a degenerative culture, as we call it. So there is competition, there is a command and control, there is the separation, the split from the professional side and the personal side. There is this alienation, there is a split of culture and nature. There's like this narrative of separation. And what we are trying to build is a search for meaning, for collaboration, and to moving into a regenerative culture, a culture based on love, right? Collaboration, of participation, of co-creation, and to build this sense of belonging, this sense of place, this shared meaning, a shared purpose. I'm working in this organization because it supports me to really fulfill my personal purpose, right? So it makes sense that I am here. And then when I start a meeting and I'm really tired, and then I finish the meeting, I'm feeling much better, with much more energy than when I started, right? So this whole narrative of interbeing, of being together as an organism, as a living organism. So this is what we're trying to, especially when we're doing consulting or trainings, this is the kind of worldview that we're aiming at, right? And sometimes we fall back, right? It's not something that is fixed, that now we're there, we are a regenerative culture, and that's it. it's usually this flow, right? So we're moving, we're making efforts to move towards this culture of regeneration, but sometimes we fall back. We go back into fear, and then how we, you know, we build this resilience of, you know, always going back to that balance, right? And then what we found is that, you know, using indicators of regeneration and of degenerative culture and regenerative culture can support that, you know, really measuring things like the lack of motivation or lack of vulnerability or spaces for vulnerability, or lack of engagement, low energy, and then measuring also, you know, when there is high energy, when there's listening, when there is motivation, you know, tracking these things can support building those structures, building those artifacts, those rituals that are going to support organizations to be more into a regenerative culture most of the time.